Hello, friends. Tonight we begin our quiet descent into a world that looks nothing like ours. A world of crumbling stone, crooked streets, and the faint echo of bells cutting through smoke. You may picture quaint villages and valiant knights, but what lies ahead is far less poetic. It's dirty, it's dangerous, and frankly, you might not make it out. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I'm doing here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. It's always amazing to see who's joining from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin tonight's journey together. Picture a city in medieval Europe. Not the pristine version you'd find in an illustrated children's book, but the real thing. A teetering labyrinth of half-timbered houses leaning into one another as though conspiring to collapse. The air is heavy with the scent of hearth smoke, boiling fats, and something vaguely unsettling that no one discusses out loud. The streets? Narrow, muddy, crawling with dogs, chickens, and enough questionable puddles to make you regret every step. This is London, year of our Lord 1272. A boiling pot of 80,000 souls, packed so tight you'd think it were a barrel of eels, but less slippery and more prone to dysentery. There are no proper sewers, just open gutters that carry all manner of filth straight down the cobbles. Chamber pots are dumped from windows with a perfunctory shout of "Gardaloo," which is about as effective as yelling "catch" before throwing a bucket of nightmares. Within this glorious mess lives Thomas Granger, a bowyer by trade and a father by constant surprise. He's 41, but already bent in the back and gray around the edges from years hunched over yew and ash. His home, if one is generous enough to call it that, is a one-room wooden hut pressed up against 5 others, sharing walls, drafts, and parasites with equal generosity. Inside, Thomas wakes each day to the sound of coughing. Not his own, but his youngest, little Edmund, age 5, whose lungs sound like they were crafted from damp parchment. The boy's breath rasps in the dark while his sisters, Agnes and Rose, scratch at red welts on their arms and try not to cry. Their straw mattress has long given up on being soft and now serves mainly as a habitat for fleas and the occasional brave mouse. Marjorie, Thomas's wife, is already stirring porridge over the open hearth, if you can call oats mixed with regret and yesterday's broth porridge. The smoke curls into the room, stinging eyes, coating every fabric and face with a thin film of soot. The family eats in silence, each spoonful a ritual of endurance. No one says it aloud, but they all taste the mildew that lives in their bedding. Thomas's workbench takes up a corner of the room, hemmed in by shavings and the sharp tang of animal glue. He shapes longbows while trying not to think of the tax collector who stopped by last week, or the guildmaster who suspects he's using off-book timber. Both threats hang heavier than the roof, which leaks during rain and moans in the wind. Still, Thomas finds his joys in the slivers of normalcy. A quick kiss to Marjorie when the children aren't looking. A stolen walk at dusk along the Thames, where the stars shimmer over the black water like a lie told kindly. In these moments, he remembers he is not yet crushed entirely. Outside, life does not pause. The streets teem with people. Merchants shouting, apprentices tripping, dogs barking at carts. Children chase each other past the tanner's yard, their laughter incongruously bright in a city steeped in filth. Overhead, the bell of St. Mary Le Bow tolls noon, shaking soot from the eaves. London is a city alive in the most visceral way. It breathes sickness, excretes noise, and hums with the restless energy of people too poor to stop moving. Fires are a constant fear. A cooking flame left unattended, a forge too hot, and suddenly a whole street becomes an offering to chaos. No fire brigade, just buckets, shouts, and prayers. And if the fires don't get you, the illnesses might. Measles, influenza, leprosy, take your pick. Water isn't safe, air isn't kind, and even a minor cut could fester into a death sentence. Thomas lost a neighbor last spring to a splinter-turned septic. He buried the man himself, with only Marjorie to help and the priest too busy to attend. Still, there is resilience. There is rhythm. The city might gnaw on you, but it does not chew aimlessly. It demands effort. and in exchange, it gives you the comfort of knowing you are not suffering alone. As dusk falls, Thomas lights a single tallow candle. Its flame trembles in the draft. He sharpens one last bough, kisses his children goodnight, and pulls a patchy wool blanket over his legs. The sounds outside soften into the low hum of distant voices, the occasional clatter of hooves. The lull of another day survived. He does not dream of riches or of a grand house on Cheapside. He dreams only of silence, of a night without coughing, of a morning where he wakes without dread. These in London are dreams enough. And so we leave Thomas here in a city that asks everything and gives back very little, but still gives something. Tomorrow will come with more work, more worry, and more smoke. But tonight, just for a moment, the streets grow still, the fleas rest. And a father too tired to hope closes his eyes. Sleep well, Thomas, and to you, dear listener, we're just getting started. Far from the choking gutters and smoky rooftops of London, there's a place where silence rules not just the air, but the soul. A monastery, ancient and crumbling, clings to a windswept cliffside like a stubborn thought, weathered, bleak, and unbothered by the passage of time. Its stone walls bear the scars of storms and solitude. Its windows flicker with candlelight, casting long shadows across corridors where echoes go to retire. You arrive just as the last light of day dies over the sea. The gate groans open with the reluctant dignity of an old man rising from a stiff chair. Brother Berengar meets you with a stare that suggests warmth is not one of his virtues. He is the abbot here, though nothing about him suggests comfort. The lines on his face are not from laughter, but from the weight of keeping order in a place that seems to resist joy on principle. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. You follow. The monastery smells of damp limestone, beeswax, and a century of whispered regrets. You walk past narrow cells with wooden doors and iron latches, past archways that frame nothing but cold stone and the occasional flicker of a dying torch. You hear chanting somewhere deeper in the structure, Latin verses rising and falling like the tide, hollow and distant. You're shown to the guest cell. It's not a room, it's an apology carved out of space. There's a straw pallet, a wooden stool, and a small cross nailed askew above the doorframe. The walls seem to lean inward, conspiring to press you into reflection, or perhaps just into the floor. You sit. The silence around you is absolute. Even your thoughts sound too loud. Dinner is a whisper of a meal. Thin gruel served in wooden bowls, bread with the density and kindness of a cobblestone. No one speaks. No one looks up. The only sound is chewing and the occasional cough that echoes like a drumbeat in the stillness. A bell rings and the monks rise in unison, robes brushing the floor like sighs, and disappear without a word. You stay seated because someone remains behind. An old monk, thin, stooped, and ghostly pale. This is Brother Silas. He is 72 winters old. His back has been bent by decades of labor in the scriptorium. His hands tremble slightly, but his eyes are clear, too clear. The kind of clarity that sees not just what's in front of him, but also every mistake he's made since the day he walked through that gate. I came here when I was young, he says, his voice dry like old parchment. 20 years old, broken. Thought I was choosing God. I was really just fleeing something I didn't understand. You say nothing. He doesn't need your words. He needs your presence. He's not telling you a story. He's exhaling a memory that's been trapped too long. At first, there was peace, order, purpose, but years pass and you realize solitude isn't the same as healing. Sometimes it's just hiding with better manners. Brother Silas shifts, his bones creaking like the monastery itself. I prayed every day, I fasted, I copied the scriptures until my fingers bled, and still, sometimes I wake in the middle of the night wondering if I wasted the only life I was given. There's no bitterness in his tone, only quiet. He stands, slowly, carefully, and bids you goodnight with a nod. You return to your cell. The mattress is lumpy, the blanket damp. Somewhere, wind whistles through a crack in the stone wall like the breath of a forgotten spirit. You don't sleep. Not immediately. You lie there, eyes open, listening to the 1,000 little sounds that aren't really sounds at all. The creak of beams, the shuffle of cloth, the thought that maybe Brother Silas isn't alone in his doubts. Morning comes in shades of gray. The chapel is colder than outside. Candles line the altar like mourners, trembling in the drafts. The monks chant lauds with the grim consistency of rainfall. No smiles, no warmth, only rhythm and ritual. You help in the garden. It's not a garden so much as a patch of stubborn earth behind the eastern wall. Brother Anselm, young, silent, sallow, shows you how to dig up frostbitten roots with a broken spade. You don't speak. He wouldn't answer if you did. The soil clings to your fingers like it knows you don't belong here. Lunch is the same as dinner, which is the same as breakfast. Gruel, bread, water that tastes faintly of tin. No meat, no herbs, no indulgence. The scriptorium, however, is a marvel. Rows of desks, each with a slanted board and a flickering candle. Monks hunched over manuscripts, copying lines they've read 1,000 times. Illuminated letters burn bright in gold leaf and red ink, though no one looks proud of them. Brother Silas sits at the far end, hunched, scratching with a quill as though carving meaning into the world one letter at a time. You watch him for a long time. That night he speaks again, only briefly. You can live a life in silence, he says, but the silence will live in you too, and that is all. You leave the next morning before dawn. No one stops you. No one says goodbye. Not even Brother Berengar, who watches from a narrow window, face unreadable. As you descend the cliff path, the monastery disappears into the mist. A stone box holding 100 souls who gave everything, hoping to find something. Peace, forgiveness, meaning, escape. What they found instead was time. And time, it turns out, is a difficult master. You walk in silence, and now back in your bed, perhaps you understand why. Sleep well. Dawn breaks like a tired promise over the northern borderlands of England. The sky is colorless, a dull smear of gray stretching over a land where sunlight is more rumor than reality. In this forgotten corner of the world, muddy, bleak, and endlessly contested, stands what's left of a village. Except calling it a village would be generous. It's more of a suggestion. A few half-collapsed huts huddle around the charred bones of a chapel, as if clinging to each other for structural support and emotional validation. Smoke no longer curls from the roofs. The fields are churned with mud and ashes. Even the crows seem to have moved on. From one of these shacks limps a figure, wrapped in layers that were once clothes and are now mostly ambition. This is Elspeth. She is 59, though the cold and war have sanded off the parts of her that remembered her birthday. She moves slowly, not out of frailty, but from the sheer weight of disappointment. Her hut, or what remains of it, leans at an angle that makes physics uncomfortable. The roof is patched with moss and old thatching, now home to a family of birds who pay no rent. The door is a plank, just the one. It doesn't open so much as sigh and let you in. Elspeth doesn't sigh. She grunts. She steps over a broken bench and heads toward the back garden. Garden, of course, being a term used with profound optimism. It's a small square of hardened earth, scattered with brittle stalks and a few lumpy turnips trying very hard not to exist. Still all she has. She kneels beside the withered rose and begins to dig with numb fingers. The earth resists. Everything resists. Her joints ache. Her breath puffs in front of her in tiny clouds that disappear faster than her hope ever did. After several minutes, she unearths 3 turnips and what might have once been a carrot or a very determined rock. As she cradles her pitiful harvest, her thoughts drift, uninvited of course, back to a month ago. The night of the raid. There were shouts. The kind of shouting that doesn't come from arguments or celebration, but from fire and steel. Scottish raiders, they said. Or maybe deserters from some baron's private war. It didn't matter. The results were the same. The chapel was burned, the livestock gone, and half the villagers never seen again. Elspeth stayed because where else would she go? Her husband died 2 winters prior, felled by a fever that didn't care how loyal or hardworking he'd been. Her children, grown and scattered, might be alive somewhere, but messages don't travel well over scorched earth and bandit-ridden trails. Besides, hope is expensive, and she's on a strict budget, so she stayed. She fixed what she could, she salvaged what remained, and she learned that survival isn't about strength, it's about knowing which kind of misery you can endure best. Inside her hut, a fire smolders pathetically. It's not for heat. there's not enough wood for that. It's for habit. A symbolic gesture against the cold that curls through the cracks like a smug intruder. She puts the turnips into a pot with water and a handful of dried nettles. Dinner is edible. That's the goal now. She eats alone, as she always does. Not in silence, but in the company of creaks, groans, and the occasional rustle from something that might be a rat or might be the wind lying to her again. She doesn't light a candle. The moonlight through the wall's holes is enough, and wax is something you hoard like treasure. Tonight, the wind is loud. It moans through the village ruins like a bored ghost. Sometimes Elspeth talks to it, not because she expects answers, but because no one else is around to be disappointed by her voice. She lies on her straw bedding, wrapped in a cloak that still smells faintly of smoke and dog. Her bones complain, her feet twitch, but she doesn't close her eyes yet. She waits for the fear to arrive, the nightly kind, quiet and insistent. Will there be another raid? Will the roof hold? Will tomorrow bring anything other than the same? She waits and waits. But tonight the fear doesn't come, not because it's gone, but because exhaustion got there first. She drifts into sleep, her breath shallow, the fire dying beside her like an old friend who doesn't want to leave first. Outside, the wind continues its lonely song over the ruins. Somewhere in the distance, a fox howls or laughs. It's hard to tell. In the morning, Elspeth will wake up. She'll rub warmth into her fingers, kick a hole in the ice at the water barrel, and start again, because there is no glory here, no grand destiny, only repetition. But that somehow is survival. You've seen the city, you've tasted the silence of the monastery, you've trudged through the ashes of a village barely holding on. But tonight, dear listener, we take you somewhere else entirely. A place where misery doesn't creep or loom. It bellows, it belches, it breathes directly into your face. Welcome to the medieval prison. Forget what you know about cells with metal bars and scheduled meals. This is not a place of order. This is chaos with a door. The prison lies beneath the city's courthouse. If court can be applied to a room where verdicts are mostly pre-decided and involve a lot of shouting and not much listening. The structure overhead is stone, cracked and sweating. Below, the floor sags under its own guilt. You don't walk into a medieval prison. You're dragged. No one ever plans to be here, not even the guards, who smell like they've been dipped in vinegar and then left to ferment. But here you are, tossed onto the straw-covered floor with the enthusiasm of a sack of rotten potatoes. The room is dark, not midnight dark, black hole dark. The only light leaks through a grate far above, and it mostly serves to remind you how far below hope you now exist. The smell hits first. It's not just bad, it's historical. Generations of filth, fear, blood, and very confused bodily functions have marinated into a scent that no language can properly describe, somewhere between mildewed despair and regret stew. You find yourself among other prisoners, some recent, some, well, they've become part of the decor. A man in the corner might be asleep or unconscious or a warning. You don't ask. Chains hang from the wall like overeager party decorations. The straw on the ground is wet. From what? Unclear. And frankly, you don't want clarity. In this cell lies another soul. His name is Corbin Hale, aged 38. Once a cooper, he made barrels for a living until one cracked wrong and crushed his foot. Unable to work, he fell behind on taxes. Then came a dispute with a merchant over a missing pig and an insult that may or may not have included the mayor's mother. The details are foggy, but the sentence was clear. Thrown into this pit to await trial, an event that may or may not ever happen. That's the beauty of the medieval justice system. It's less about innocence and more about who can survive long enough to complain. Corbin's leg never healed right. It's twisted, swollen, and smells like it's plotting something. He uses a piece of broken wood as a crutch when he can. Most of the time, he just sits, waiting. He's been here for 14 days, or maybe 40. It's hard to count when the light never changes and the food comes sporadically and only in textures, not flavors. Gruel, moldy bread, water that tastes like it remembers better times. There's no doctor, no nurse, no prayers, except the ones you whisper into the straw and hope aren't eaten by rats first. Corbin tries not to speak. Talking invites attention. Attention gets you hurt. There are men in this cell who've forgotten what words mean. They grunt, mutter, or just scream at the wall. One sings, constantly. A song with no melody and fewer lyrics. Corbin hates the singing, but he fears silence more. At night, if you can call it night, the cold seeps in like it's been waiting all day. The walls ooze moisture. Your breath fogs and then freezes to your upper lip. If you don't curl up tight, the damp finds your bones and settles there like unwanted tenants. There are no blankets, no beds, just the straw, the wet, and the hope that whatever is crawling on your leg isn't big enough to bite. Sometimes the guards come down to laugh. Sometimes they come for someone else. Once, they came and never left, dragging a man who cried until he stopped. Corbin didn't sleep that night, or the next. He keeps his back to the wall, always. He dreams of barrels, not because he loved his job, but because barrels meant purpose, structure, a roundness to life. Now everything is jagged and damp and filled with echoes. One day a young boy is thrown in, no older than 12, accused of theft, bread, maybe an apple, maybe both. He's silent for 2 days, then starts sobbing in his sleep. No one comforts him, there's nothing to say. Corbin shares part of his bread. It's moldy, but the boy eats it like it's roasted lamb. And for a moment, a tiny, fleeting moment, Corbin feels human again. Then the guards come. They don't speak. They just grab the boy and go. The cell is quieter after that and colder. No one here remembers names or birthdays or the color of the sky. Time becomes something you taste, not measure. It tastes like dust and skin and the bitter edge of prayers gone sour. Corbin doesn't know if he'll ever leave. But every day he wakes up. He moves his fingers, he counts them, he listens for rats, for guards, for footsteps that might mean anything. He is alive, for now. And that's the sentence no one tells you about. Tonight we climb, not to conquer, not to escape, not even to admire a view, because, frankly, the medieval concept of a view was mostly, can I see invading armies from here? No, tonight we climb to reach a place few ever dared to, the home of a hermit. One man, one hut, one very intentional absence of society. High in the Scottish Highlands, where clouds settle like gossip over the peaks and the wind bites through wool like it has unresolved anger issues, stands a hermitage. A stone hut, perched like a barnacle on a cliffside with no road leading to it, no visitors dropping by, and no comfort permitted beyond what moss will naturally provide. This is where Elfric lives. He is 65, though he looks like time itself has been chewing on him for a few decades and occasionally forgetting to swallow. His skin is cracked like old parchment, his beard tangled with twigs and theology. His cloak, once brown, now just weather, hasn't been washed since the last coronation. Aelfric wasn't banished here. He came willingly years ago, after a personal epiphany that most likely involved a migraine and some expired cheese. He called it divine revelation. Others called it losing your marbles. Regardless, he built his hut from local stone, prayer, and an unsettling level of optimism. The hut is smaller than a chicken coop, but less lively. Inside is a slab of stone to sleep on, a cracked bowl for soup he never has, and an altar made from driftwood. There's a hole in the floor for his, well, bodily exits, because even holy men have plumbing needs. There is no fire. Fire is indulgence, Elfric believes. Comfort is temptation. Warmth breeds softness, so instead he wraps himself in a wool cloak that could probably crawl away on its own and shivers until dawn. It's less piety, more daily near-death experience. He doesn't eat much. Wild herbs, dried lichen, berries that taste like punishment. Occasionally, a shepherd leaves him a crust of bread and muttered condolences. Elfric nods in thanks, says nothing. He took a vow of silence the same day he took a vow of isolation. Talking is for people who might get answers, but he prays. Oh, how he prays. At sunrise, at sunset, when the wind screams like a banshee with abandonment issues, Elfric is on his knees chanting, not in whispers, but in a low, deliberate voice that rises like fog. Latin psalms, Gaelic lamentations, sometimes something older, something wordless, something that feels like the mountain is listening. He's been doing this for 40 years. No holidays, no sabbaticals, no mental health breaks. His hands are curled from frostbite, his knees ache from stone, his back hunches like a question mark that will never get answered. But his eyes, they burn. Not with madness, though that certainly lives rent-free nearby, but with something harder to name: purpose. He keeps track of time by carving a notch into the stone outside his hut every morning, one notch. Every day. There are thousands now, a forest of solitude grown from rock. The mountain has become his diary, each line a sentence written in suffering and salt. Elfric doesn't dream anymore, or if he does, he doesn't remember. Sleep comes when it wants and leaves without warning. Nights are long, stars hide behind mist. The cold doesn't sting, it seeps. It climbs into his joints and builds little forts. But he stays. He stays because leaving would mean explaining, and explanations are for people who doubt. Elfric doesn't doubt, not anymore. Maybe not ever. He believes this pain purifies, that clarity is sharpened by hunger, that God hears him best when no one else is talking, that if he just kneels long enough, the silence will speak back. Sometimes it does. Not in voices, but in moments. A raven landing beside him and cawing like a grumpy prophet, a shaft of light piercing the fog like a hallelujah, the sound of his own heartbeat in the stillness reminding him, you are still here. Once, during a blizzard, he saw something, or someone, a figure in white, standing just beyond reach, no face, no words, just presence. He didn't chase it, he bowed. Another time he slipped on ice and broke a rib. He lay for 2 days, unmoving, eyes fixed on the sky. He didn't curse. He prayed. Because to Elfric, suffering is not a sign that faith is failing. It's proof that the world still has teeth, and God presumably has a plan for those who keep chewing. Would he recommend this life to others? He wouldn't recommend this life to a goat. But that's not the point. He didn't come here for pleasure or legacy. He came here to disappear in the hope that what remained might be closer to something holy. And whether he found it or not, he stayed. Years passed, then decades, and now he is stone among stones, a figure the shepherds tell their children about. The man on the mountain, the priest who forgot how to leave, the one who talks to wind. But here's the quiet twist. In all this silence, he has changed. Not in body, that's mostly frostbite and bad posture, but in presence. He is still, in a way that modern souls have forgotten how to be. He is not anxious, not hurried, not hungry for answers he'll never get. He is simply here, praying, breathing, and waiting for the next dawn. Beneath the world you know, beneath the cities, the churches, the dirt paths, and the pig-infested marketplaces, there is another place. It is not on maps. It does not host festivals. It is not, under any circumstances, a destination. It is a plague pit. And tonight, that's exactly where we're going. Not for fun, not for horror, just for truth. Because if the medieval world had one constant companion, it wasn't faith or war or even bread. It was death. And when that death came in bulk, you got pits. Deep, wide, and unceremonious. Mass graves dug fast, filled faster. London, 1348. The Black Death has arrived, and it's not knocking. It's kicking down the door and licking the furniture. Whole families are gone in days. Streets are silent, except for the sound of carts, wooden wheels creaking slowly, the bring out your dead kind. Not metaphorical, actual carts, actual dead. And someone, of course, has to dig the pits. Enter Father Oswin. He was once a cleric, not a high one. Not the kind who debates scripture in Latin while sipping imported wine. No, Oswin was a parish priest in the East End, humble, muddy, and consistently behind on laundry. Now he is the city's last responder. The churches are full, the crypts are full, even the fields have stopped accepting tenants. So Oswin digs. Each morning before dawn, he lifts his spade and walks through the mist toward the edge of the city, where the earth has been desecrated so often it no longer resists. His boots sink into mud slick with yesterday's rain and yesterday's regrets. He digs a hole, wide enough for dozens, deep enough to forget their names. The bodies arrive by cart, wrapped in cloth, sometimes not. Some with coins still clenched between teeth, fare for a ferry that probably isn't coming. Some so small they fit between the arms of others, like secrets tucked into silence. Oswin lowers them in gently, or at least tries to. There is no reverence in efficiency, but he gives what he can, a muttered prayer, a sign of the cross, a single tear that no one sees. He sprinkles lime over the bodies, not because it sanctifies, because it hides the smell. Then the next layer, and the next. By nightfall, the pit is full. He marks it with a wooden cross, if there's time, if he has wood. Sometimes there's only a rock, and then he begins again. He no longer flinches at the sight, or the smell, or the sound bodies make when they land on other bodies. He's past that. Numbness is a form of grace, in its own awful way. But he does flinch at the children. Always the children. Once, he found a boy clutching a doll. Not a carved one, just rags tied around straw. The child's hand was locked around it even in death. Oswin tried to separate them, couldn't, so he buried them together. There are no funerals now, no choirs, no candles. Just silence and coughing. Oswin has stopped going home. His house is probably looted by now, or haunted, or both. He sleeps near the pit, wrapped in a blanket he found on a corpse, because warmth, like hope, is sometimes secondhand. He doesn't fear the plague anymore, not because he's brave, because it's everywhere. It's in the air, in the touch, in the breath of anyone who still walks. You can't dodge fog, you can't negotiate with rats, but Oswin keeps digging. Not because he's paid. He isn't. Not because he's thanked, he won't be, but because someone must remember that these bodies were people, that they once laughed, once fought, once loved someone, and now they are dust. But dust, Oswin believes, still deserves dignity. Some nights he sings, not hymns, folk songs, the kind his mother used to hum while baking bread. It echoes oddly in the hollow pit, a lullaby for the lost. He imagines they hear it, and maybe, just maybe it helps. One evening, a woman arrives. She walks slowly, wrapped in dark cloth, carries a bundle, says nothing, just stands at the edge. Oswin doesn't ask, he only nods. She unwraps the bundle and sets it down. It's a baby. Swaddled, still. She doesn't cry, she doesn't look away. She simply waits until Oswin lowers the child into the pit. Then she leaves. Oswin watches her vanish into the fog, and for the first time in weeks, he sits down and weeps. Not loud, just enough. Just enough to remind himself he hasn't turned to stone. The plague will pass, it always does, but the pit remains, covered, forgotten, built over. Centuries later, someone will dig a foundation and find bones. Dozens. Stacked like history tried to erase them and failed. And someone will say, oh, this must have been from the plague. But Oswin will not be remembered. No statue, no stained glass, only the dirt, only the pit, only the song. Tonight, we go where men rarely tread. Not because they're forbidden, but because most of them would faint at the smell. We're entering a medieval birthing room, or more accurately, a medieval birthing corner. Because the concept of a room is optimistic, and the idea of cleanliness is still a few centuries away. This is Margot's world. She is a midwife, 60 years old, with hands like twisted rope and eyes that have seen everything. Joy, grief, blood, betrayal, and birth. Mostly birth. Hundreds of them. In barns, kitchens under staircases, and once, memorably during a town riot. The baby came out screaming, which was appropriate. Margot lives on the edge of a village with no name worth remembering. Her house smells like lavender, smoke, and whatever herbs she's left hanging to dry. The ceiling is low, the floor is dirt, and the walls are stuffed with bundles of sage, rosemary, and secrets. She carries a satchel wherever she goes. Inside, linen cloths, swaddling bands, a dull knife, several charms, dried toadstools, and a rock that she swears calms mothers in labor. It probably doesn't. But the women believe in Margot, and belief is a kind of anesthesia. She's summoned at odd hours by boys banging on her door. My lady, she's started, they yell, wide-eyed, barefoot. Margot doesn't ask how long it's been. If the baby's coming, it's coming. You don't schedule these things. Tonight, she's called to the edge of the village, to a hut leaning at such an angle it looks like it's trying to bow out of responsibility. Inside is Agnes, 17, terrified and in the middle of her first birth. Her husband is outside, pacing in circles, muttering prayers that aren't helping anyone. Margot enters like she always does, without fanfare, without noise, just presence, solid and rooted. She kneels beside Agnes, touches her forehead, mutters something that might be a blessing or might be a recipe. Push with the pain, she says gently, not against it. Agnes screams. Margot doesn't flinch. This is normal. Screaming means they're still trying. It's the silence you watch for. The sudden stillness, that's when things start slipping. The room smells of sweat, fear, and something metallic. The hearth is lit, but it does little. Agnes is slick with effort, her face contorted, breath short and ragged. Margot checks for progress, nods. "It's coming," she says. And it's stubborn. Most are. She reaches into her satchel. Out comes the dull knife, sterilized in fire only because Margot insists. Then the swaddling bands, warmed near the coals. Everything is ready as one can be in a world where medicine is closer to prayer than science. The baby arrives 2 hours later, howling like it already has complaints. Margot cuts the cord, wraps the child, and lays it on Agnes's chest. There is crying, real crying. The father rushes in and falls to his knees like someone just invented miracles. Margot doesn't stay. She leaves with blood on her hands and straw in her hair. Walks home in the dark, guided by instinct and moonlight. There's no payment tonight. Only a loaf of bread and a promise of eggs. It's enough. She washes in cold water, scrubs until her skin stings. Not because she's afraid of disease, though it lurks, but because it feels like ritual, like respect. She's lost mothers before. Not many, considering the odds, but enough. And every time, she remembers. She remembers Ellen, who bled too fast. She remembers Lise, who never woke up after the babe cried. She remembers the stillborns. So many. Sometimes too small to bury properly. Wrapped in cloth and handed off with the softest lie Margot could find. And she remembers the silence after. The men who blamed her, the priests who questioned her soul. The neighbors who whispered, "She's been too lucky." Because to survive in this job is to be both healer and witch, saint and suspect. One hand on life, the other accused of holding death. Margot keeps no husband, no children, not anymore. She once had a daughter. She doesn't speak of her, but she lights a candle every year on a day no one else remembers. Still, she rises with each call, each knock on the door, each scream in the night, because someone must. And Margot knows things no one else does. She knows how to ease a breech birth with 2 fingers and a whispered song. She knows which herbs will calm labor and which ones will stop it. Dangerous knowledge, kept quiet. She knows that women die more from fear than failure. So she stays. Years pass, her hands shake more, her knees ache with each crouch, but when she walks into a room, the women still breathe easier, because Margot is there. And that, somehow, is enough. Tonight, we take a deep breath and immediately regret it, because we're stepping into a place that has cured absolutely nothing but has still managed to thrive for centuries, the medieval physician's chamber. A place of potions, smoke, bloodletting, and confidence utterly unsupported by results. The air is thick with the scent of dried herbs, old sweat, and something pungent. You can't place it. A mixture of vinegar, bad breath, and overconfidence. This is the lair of Master Berwin, self-declared physician, apothecary, and extractor of ill humors. He is 45 and has treated nearly a dozen patients without losing all of them. Berwin's clinic is a glorified broom closet attached to a butcher's stall. His desk is stained with ancient spills, and his shelves groan under the weight of bottles with labels like elixir of warm bile, goose grease, and powdered toad, lightly salted. On the wall hangs a chart of the 4 humors: blood, black bile, yellow bile, and phlegm, which he references with all the seriousness of someone describing the stock market. A patient enters. She's pale, sweating, and can barely speak. Berwin looks at her for exactly 2 seconds and declares, "Excess phlegm." His treatment? Bloodletting. Always bloodletting. It doesn't matter what's wrong. Cough? Bloodletting. Rash? Bloodletting. Heartbreak? Probably too much blood in the spleen. Out comes the leech jar. Berwin's pride and joy. Inside are a dozen fat, sluggish little vampires, ready to balance the body by making it lighter. Berwin nods sagely. Yes, that's the bile resisting. He applies 3 leeches to her neck, 2 to her thighs, and 1, questionably, to her forehead. She faints. Success, Berwin thinks. The patient has entered alignment. He leaves her on the bench and turns to his next visitor, a boy with a broken arm. It's clearly bent at a horrifying angle, but Berwin waves it off. Disrupted harmony of marrow, he declares. He prescribes a compress of moldy bread and warm urine. No splint, no setting, just suffering. The boy's mother offers him 2 coins and a chicken. He accepts the chicken but says the boy owes him more phlegm next time. In the corner of the clinic is an open fire where Berwin prepares his salves. The recipe? Equal parts ash, lard, garlic, and optimism. He stirs with a wooden spoon that's also used for soup. Hygiene isn't so much ignored as simply never invented. To his credit, Berwin believes in what he does. He studied under a man who studied under another man who once visited a monastery. That counts as education. He can read a little Latin, enough to misinterpret scripture and confuse liver with God's lantern. He owns 2 books, both stolen. One on herb lore, one on astrology. He often prescribes star-based remedies. Oh, your spleen is swollen? Venus is in retrograde? Try eating fennel while facing north. His success rate is, statistically speaking, abysmal. But people keep coming, because there's no alternative. The barber surgeon in town only does amputations. The priest can pray but not sew wounds. And the midwife, Margot, refuses to deal with anything that involves boils, goats, or arrogant men. So they come to Berwin. They come with fevers, rashes, coughs, demons, and dreams. He treats them all, sometimes with honey, sometimes with ash, sometimes with frogs, alive or otherwise. He even has a favorite spell for stubborn infections. It involves a chant, a crushed beetle, and spitting over the left shoulder. He says it works better if you don't ask questions. Once, a knight came in with a sword wound. Berwin packed it with onion and declared the man cured of excess heat. The knight died 2 days later, but Berwin insists it was the man's pessimism, not the treatment. He's been treating himself for decades. He drinks vinegar every morning to keep his humors humble. He rubs goose fat on his knees. He hasn't had a real bowel movement in months, but claims it's because his intestines ascended spiritually. He fears 2 things: actual physicians from universities and cats, which he claims hoard secrets. To his credit, Berwin rarely panics, even when a patient vomits blood, even when a wound pulses visibly, even when a leech escapes and attaches to his own eye. He called it a humbling experience. And despite all this, despite the dubious hygiene, the questionable ethics, the deeply concerning outcomes, people still thank him because they feel seen. He listens. He speaks with confidence. He names their suffering. He gives it meaning. And sometimes that's all people need. A story to hold on to, a jar of goose fat, and someone who will say, yes, I can fix this, even if he absolutely cannot. Tonight, we arrive at a place meant to be holy, sacred, a sanctuary. But this is the Middle Ages, and sanctuaries, they're complicated. Welcome to St. Mirabel's House for Foundlings, a name that promises mercy, charity, and perhaps a bit of warm bread. What it delivers is a lesson in what happens when good intentions are left unsupervised for several centuries. The building itself is impressive at first glance. A high stone wall, carved wooden gate, and a bell tower that leans ever so slightly like it's trying to hear confessions from the street. Inside, it's another story. The floors are cracked, the windows leak, and the scent, somewhere between boiled cabbage and damp wool, clings to everything like guilt. This is where the unwanted go. The babies left in baskets, the toddlers found wandering near rivers, the children whose parents died of plague, war, famine, or just exhaustion. They're brought here with a note, or a hope, or nothing at all. And they are received by Sister Alditha. She is the abbess, 57, thin as a quill, sharp as one too. Her mouth is a straight line. Her rosary clinks like a warning. She does not smile. Smiling is a luxury, and St. Mirabel's is bankrupt. Alditha believes in 3 things: God, order, and porridge. The porridge is served twice a day. Always gray. Always too thin. It squeaks when stirred. That's not a joke. The children eat in silence, seated on long benches, backs straight. No talking, no laughing. Laughter leads to chaos. Chaos leads to sin. Sin leads to, well, Alditha has a chart somewhere and it ends with fire. The dormitory is one giant room with rows of straw pallets, no blankets. Blankets make children soft. The roof leaks over bed number 4, but that's God's test. Whoever sleeps there gets extra prayers. The youngest are cared for by Sister Emelina, a novice with a kind heart and a terrible memory. She once swaddled a baby in the laundry list. Another time, she accidentally gave a 3-year-old a vial of tincture meant for a donkey. The child slept for 2 days. It was the most peaceful 2 days the dormitory ever had. But even mistakes are welcome here, because no one else wants these children. They are too loud, too dirty, too hungry, too broken. So St. Mirabel's takes them and teaches them how not to need. They wake at dawn, they pray, they scrub floors, peel turnips, clean chamber pots. They pray again. Then they copy scripture, not to learn Latin, but to keep their hands busy. Idle hands, after all, are the devil's playthings, and this place has enough devils without adding creativity to the mix. If they survive to age 10, they're promoted, which means they're allowed to work in the laundry or the kitchen, where burns and blisters are part of the curriculum. Some are sent to serve noble households, others to farms. A few, if they're lucky and symmetrical, get taken by monasteries to be trained as scribes. Most vanish into labor. Alditha keeps records, not names, numbers. Names are for families. These children are responsibility 12, burden 46, temporary 71, except one. She calls herself Briani. She is 9, sharp-eyed, quick-witted, dangerous in a place like this. Bryony wasn't dropped off. She walked in 3 years ago, barefoot, covered in soot, holding a stick like a sword. Said her parents were dead or gone, whichever comes first. Refused to give a surname. Said surnames were for people who stayed put. Alditha hated her immediately. Bryony speaks when she shouldn't. Thinks faster than her prayers. Hides bread for the smaller ones. Stares down the older boys. Once bit a guard who tried to take her locket. She doesn't have a locket, she bit him anyway. She knows how to read. Not just scripture. Everything. She reads people. Reads silence. Reads the way Sister Alditha clutches her crucifix tighter when someone cries too loud. Bryony has a plan. Not an escape. Not exactly. But a vision. She draws maps on scraps of linen, routes from the garden wall to the outer gate. She memorizes guard rotations, knows when the cook's son sneaks in wine and where he hides the corkscrew. And she's waiting. Not for a miracle. For a moment. Because Bryony understands something the nuns don't. This place doesn't protect children. It teaches them how to disappear quietly, and Bryony refuses. So she sharpens her stick sword nightly, tells stories to the littlest ones about a city made of clouds where children run the kitchens and eat jam for breakfast, where no one prays out of fear, where blankets are soft, and laughter is not sin, but salvation. They believe her. Mostly. She doesn't. Not yet. But she's working on it. One night during storm season, the bell tower is struck by lightning. Everyone rushes to the chapel, except Bryony. She slips into the records room, finds the page with her number, 37, and tears it out. Just that. Then she returns. Quietly. No one notices. But she smiles. A real one. The first in months, because names matter, and Bryony intends to keep hers. Tonight we stand at the edge, not of a cliff, not of a revelation, but of a city. Because no matter how grand a medieval town claimed to be, how high its spires, how wide its market, how colorful its plagues, every single one had a gate, and every gate had a keeper. His name is Thorn, and he is very, very tired, not just physically, though his knees do creak and his spine sounds like a haunted door every time he bends. No, Thorn is tired in his soul, the kind of exhaustion only bureaucracy, pointless arguments, and 27 years of shouting, "State your name and business," can provide. He's 53, built like a doorframe, skin like old parchment, sunburnt and soot-kissed. His beard used to be red, now it's mostly gray and sarcasm. Thorn lives in the gatehouse, 2 cramped rooms above the arch, accessible only by a spiral staircase designed to punish optimism. The ceiling leaks, the floor creaks, and the mattress has been lumpy since the last crusade. He has 3 tools of the trade. 1, a pike, taller than he is. 2, a key ring large enough to moonlight as a weapon. 3, and a ledger, in which he writes everything. Every name, every animal, every suspicious bundle, every traveler who smells weird, which is most of them. The city gate opens at dawn, and with it comes chaos. Merchants, peasants, nobles on horseback, pilgrims barefoot and glassy-eyed, dogs, chickens, occasionally geese who do not respect order, and always, always someone trying to sneak something in. Today it's a man with a barrel. Thorn squints. What's in the barrel? Salted fish, the man says. The barrel sloshes. Thorn taps it with his pike. It moans. Fish don't moan. Thorn says. The man runs. Thorn sighs. Not because of the deception, but because now he has to run. He catches the man, eventually, ties him to the holding post, adds attempted smuggling, possible corpse to the ledger. Then returns to the gate, already behind on his counts. A noblewoman rides up, nostrils flared like she's just sniffed poverty. She demands entry without question. Thorn asks her name. She shouts. He smiles. Because yelling at Thorn doesn't work. He's been insulted by professionals. Once, a bishop threw a boot at him. He kept it, uses it to hold the gate open during storms. The noblewoman eventually gives her name. Thorn flips through his ledger. Shack finds her uncle, remembers he still owes a fee for 2 unclaimed sheep. He lets her in, but not before noting her horse might be limping. Details matter. That's Thorn's unofficial motto. He doesn't stop threats. That's what the city guard is for. He watches, he listens, and he remembers. Like the old woman with the red scarf who visits every Tuesday, always carrying a basket of herbs that no one buys. Or the boy who whistles the same tune every time he enters, off-key, but determined. Or the masked figure who came 3 months ago, said nothing, and vanished into the crowd. Thorn's been checking faces ever since, but most days are the same. Open the gate, watch the world crawl in, record its footprints. One night during the 3rd frost, a storm lashes the city. Rain like nails, wind like wolves. Most gates would be closed, but not Thorn's, because out of the dark stumbles a girl, young, barefoot, covered in mud, no name, just eyes that have seen too much. Thorn doesn't ask questions. He lets her in, gives her his spare cloak, the one that smells like old oats and pipe smoke. She doesn't thank him, but she doesn't need to. She survives. Weeks later, he sees her again, selling apples near the market. Hair brushed, boots too big, eyes still wary. She nods at him. He nods back and writes nothing. Some stories don't belong in ledgers. Thorn's shift ends at sundown, unless it doesn't. Because if the guard's drunk or the captain forgets the rotation or someone breaks the outer wall with a poorly timed cart, Thorn stays. Because if the gate doesn't work, the city doesn't either. He's seen fires, riots, wedding parades that turned into fistfights, and once a priest duel. Candlesticks were involved. He's locked the gate for plague, opened it for kings, and once, just once, watched someone leave with no intention of returning. A young man, dressed simply, carrying nothing but a lute, said he was going where songs are needed. Thorn wanted to say, songs are needed here, but didn't, because some gates are one way. Now, as the sun sets over cracked walls and crooked roofs, Thorn leans on his pike and watches the last traveler shuffle past, a tinker, whistling, carrying nothing but a bag of pots and an unreasonable amount of hope. Thorn closes the gate, turns the key, writes it all down, then climbs the stairs, creaking with memory, and sleeps. Tomorrow it begins again, because someone must keep watch, someone must remember, and Thorn, gatekeeper, scribe, silent judge of humanity, has never missed a shift. Tonight we sit at a table, not in a tavern, not in a great hall, not in a warm, candle-lit library. No, this table is in the middle of a market between a fishmonger and a man who claims his onions can cure jealousy. It wobbles, it smells, it has ink stains older than some villages, and behind it sits Lynn. She's 33, small, quiet, wrapped in wool too thin for the season and boots 2 sizes too large. Her fingers are stained black. Her hair is tied back with a ribbon that once was blue, now a kind of committed gray. Lynn is a professional scribe, which is to say she writes what others cannot, because in the medieval world, most people are illiterate. Farmers, servants, even some knights can't read a prayer, let alone compose a letter, but words still need sending. Messages, pleas, threats, confessions, sometimes poems, so they come to her. Lynn arrives at dawn, sets out her tools, inkpot, quills, sand shaker, a board for blotting, and her ledger, filled not with names but with payments and deadlines. She charges by the page. Extra for decoration, half price for secrets. She never asks questions. A man sits, his hands are rough, his eyes too wet. I need to write to my son, he says, voice cracking. He left for the wars. Lynn nods, dips her pen, begins. My dearest boy. She doesn't write exactly what the man says. She writes what he means. The pride beneath his worry. The fear beneath his pride. The apology wrapped in silence. The man pays her with 2 eggs and a button carved from bone. She accepts. Another client arrives, a young woman with callous palms and a scowl sharp enough to chip stone. She wants to write to the baker's apprentice, a love letter. But angry, Lynn listens, very carefully, then writes, "Your bread is not the only thing that has grown stale." The woman nods and smiles. Lynn's handwriting is neat, elegant, not flowery, but strong. It makes even petty insults feel noble. She signs everything with a single swirl, her mark. She doesn't include her name. She doesn't have one. Not one she shares, just the writing woman. She has her usuals. A tailor who sends invoices laced with passive aggression, a widow who writes weekly to her sister pretending everything is fine, a man who dictates prayers for the dead, different names each time, and she listens to them all because sometimes people don't need a letter, they need a witness. And Lynn is very good at witnessing. She writes for everyone, the poor, the petty, the powerful. Once she wrote for a Lord's steward, 5 letters in Latin, dripping with threats and veiled insults. She was paid in gold. She used it to buy a roof. Another time, she wrote for a child who had lost her dog. The letter was to heaven. It read, "Please feed him. He likes bones, but not the spicy ones." Lynn didn't charge for that one. Midday, the market roars around her. Fish slap against scales. Arguments bloom like mold. The smell of sweat, smoke, and onions hangs in the air like a poorly tuned choir. But at her table, there's quiet, because writing slows the world. It forces people to choose their words, to untangle their emotions, to remember. In the afternoon, a man arrives in a hood. His voice is low, his request dangerous. He wants a forgery, a seal, a name, a lie. Lynn does not flinch. She asks no questions. Beth writes it cleanly, quickly, then burns the draft copy. The man pays in silver and leaves without looking back. Lynn adds the coin to a pouch sewn inside her cloak, just in case, because writing can save, but it can also damn, and Lynn lives between those lines. She once wrote a letter that stopped a duel, another that started one. She wrote a confession that cleared a servant of theft. She wrote another that condemned a noble to exile. Both paid well, but she remembers the names, all of them, even if she never says them aloud. By evening, her fingers ache. Ink stains her wrists. The wind picks up, cold and full of stories. She packs up slowly, puts her tools away with care, walks home beneath a sky smeared with stars. Her house is small, 1 window, 1 candle, 1 stack of parchment that no one will ever read. Letters she never sent, things she needed to say, to the mother who vanished, to the brother who never came back, to the version of herself that believed in answers. She writes to them all, at night, by firelight, with no audience, no payment, just ink and silence, because even the writer needs a witness, and sometimes the only one listening is the page. Tonight we go underground again, not to plague pits this time, but to something quieter, darker, and somehow more lonely, the mine. Imagine a hole in the earth so deep it swallows light and sense alike. A yawning cavern of damp stone, dripping water, dust, and echoes of pickaxes striking ore, that metallic bark of desperation. This is where Morcar works. He's 26, chest bare under a patched tunic that smells of sweat, soot, and bad ale. His face is streaked with grime. Scars run across his forearms from slips of the pickaxe. His fingernails are permanently black. His lungs taste of rock. Morcar is a coal miner, or a charcoal miner, or more accurately, an unpaid extractor of survival. Because nobody gets rich mining here. Riches stay at the top by the fire with goblets and lace collars. Morcar lives down here, scraping out enough to get out, if only briefly. He enters the shaft each dawn, the air damp and heavy as guilt. A narrow tunnel carved by hand, crooked, unstable, always threatening to collapse. Wood beams brace the ceiling, some missing or eaten by rot. Every step is a negotiation with gravity. He carries a lamp, an open flame flickering in the cheek of darkness. Its smoke and dim shine carve his world in orange shadows. Without it, he'd be swallowed whole. He works with a partner, Jorah, a woman 10 years older, her muscles coiled tight like springs. Her laugh is rare but fierce, once heard, never forgotten. Together they chip at coal seams, load baskets, heave them up the shaft. It's wet, cold, hazardous. There's no sanitation, no medicine, no oversight. A misstep and you're buried. A spark and you're burned. A breath of bad air and, well, no doctor is coming down here. At midday, they surface in a clearing scarred by makeshift huts. Miners huddle around fires, warming their hands on mugs of skanky broth. Jorah and Morcar trade a nod, share stale bread, and collapse into silence. No complaints, no songs, just eating, because noise might summon attention, and attention costs coin. Yet even here, humanity seeps through cracks. An old man, missing 3 fingers, scratches a tune on a battered hurdy-gurdy. Morcar listens. The tune is minor, melancholy in melody. It makes his chest hurt. A child passes by with a bucket of water. She smiles without teeth and offers him a sip. He drinks. She lingers. He nods, fists clenching at emptiness. Then he returns underground. Afternoon brings collapse tests. They light a lamp at the end of a tunnel to check air. Sometimes it blazes, poor air. Sometimes it dies, no oxygen. Morcar doesn't flinch anymore. He's memorized the patterns. Move quick, move steady. When the lamp sputters, pull Jorah's sleeve. They retreat. He hits coal seams with hiss and clink. Every fragment sent skyward is another promise. Another basket closer to the top. At times he thinks, why? Why do this way? Because his mother is sick. His sister needs bread. Their cottage leans in shame, but it's home. He remembers a childhood when he chased goats in summer, picked berries with his sister. A time when sky meant something above, not just a flicker of light near the gate. Now the sky is a distance, a tease, reminder of something lost. He works until his back caves, lungs burn, flame sputters. Then he surfaces again. Night brings the tavern, a hole in the wall with hay and a wounded stool. Beer that tastes like burnt metal. He drinks with Jorah and others. They share stories about collapses they survived, near misses, shadows they saw moving in the tunnels, ghosts, rats, their own minds splintering. They pass 2 pints, 3, silence slips. Laughter brittle at first, then real. Small miracles. They stagger home under stars. Morcar looks up and squints. Sky is still there, still distant, still breathless, but he breathes. By morning he heads back. Again. Reminder shows up in the shape of Jorah's nod. Back? He nods back. Yes. Always yes. Tomorrow, more tunnels. Tomorrow, more dust. Tomorrow, maybe enough coal to buy a door that shuts, or a roof that stays watertight, or medicine for his mother, or even maybe hope. They build above ground with those baskets. They live underground for the rest. In that darkness, they become both shadows and keepers. They dig holes that become hands reaching for light. They carve survival out of coal. Morcar's name doesn't fill ledgers, but it warms hearths. In the heart of darkness, he keeps the world burning. Tonight, we light a candle, not to pray, not to summon ghosts, but to understand the strange, waxy world of a profession that made medieval nights slightly less terrifying: the chandlers. This is Elfrida's domain. She's 40, lives above her workshop, smells perpetually of tallow, beeswax, and mild regret. Her hair is always tied back, mostly to avoid spontaneous combustion, and her sleeves are rolled tight because, as she says, you only need to catch fire once to learn. Elfrida makes candles, real ones, by hand, by repetition, by sheer will. Her day starts before dawn, ironically, in darkness. She fumbles for her tinderbox, mutters curses under her breath, and finally coaxes a flame into her hearth. The fire sputters like it resents her, but it lives. She feeds it scraps, broken crates, shaved wax, bits of bark. Then the work begins. There are 2 kinds of candles in her world. 1, tallow, made from rendered animal fat. Cheap, smoky, smells like boiled regret. 2, beeswax, golden, clean burning, and so expensive it's practically smug. Elfrida makes both, but mostly tallow, because beeswax is for churches, noble halls, and smug monks who claim poverty while hoarding honey. Tallow is for the rest of humanity: peasants, bakers, night guards, midwives trying not to trip over screaming mothers. She starts with the fat, boiled in a pot large enough to stew a heretic. The smell is unforgettable. A blend of beef, old shoes, and something that might have once been hope. It clings to the walls, to her clothes, to her soul. Then she dips, 1 wick, 1 pot. Dip, then out. Let cool, then dip again and again and again. It takes dozens of dips to build a single candle. You don't make candles quickly, you grow them, like waxy, flammable stalagmites. She lines them up on racks, rows and rows of future light, each one imperfect, each one a little lumpy, like people. She doesn't waste wax. Every drip gets scraped, melted, reborn. In the back of her shop is a pile of failed candles, bent, cracked, or too stubby to sell. She calls it the graveyard. Sometimes she talks to them. "You tried," she says. "That's more than most." Customers arrive in waves, a baker needing light for pre-dawn loaves, a constable needing a lantern refill, though Elfrida suspects it's more for sneaking off to see the widow across the lane. A child with 3 coins and a prayer, asking for something to help his sick mother sleep through the night. Elfrida gives him a candle and an extra wick. Says nothing. Sometimes nobility sends servants. They ask for beeswax. They ask if it can be scented. Elfrida fights the urge to shove a tallow stick up their nose. Instead, she bows, fetches the finest wax she has, charges them triple, and spends the profit buying bread for the neighbors, because light, she believes, should not be a luxury. But it is. Every evening, as the sun bleeds into the hills and shadows rise like rumors, Elfrida lights her display candles. The shop glows, warm, flickering, imperfect. People gather outside just to look, not to buy, just to stand in the light. She lets them. No charge. Light isn't just for seeing, it's for remembering you're not alone. She once made candles for a funeral, a child. She didn't ask who, didn't want to know. She carved a small sun into the base of the wax. No one noticed, but she knew. And she cried when it burned. She made a candle once that lasted 6 nights. She didn't sell it. She kept it, lit it when her brother died, when the river froze, when the fever came and took 3 streets. She lights it only when the world feels too heavy. It's almost gone now, but she still has the stub. Her fingers are scarred, burns, blisters. Wax hardens quick, skin doesn't. She doesn't wear gloves, says they make her clumsy. She once caught fire, briefly. Put it out with a bucket and a curse so vile the nearby priest dropped his prayer book. She laughed for an hour. Sometimes she sings while she works. Old songs, mournful, wordless. The candles seem to burn steadier when she does. Her neighbors swear her shop never truly goes dark, even when shuttered. They say she leaves one candle always burning. They're right. It sits on her windowsill, small, flickering, defiant, because Elfrida understands something most forget. In a world ruled by fire, darkness is always hunting, and someone must keep it at bay, one wick at a time. Tonight, we bathe. But don't get too excited. This isn't a spa. There are no scented candles, no lavender oils, no soft music. This is a medieval bathhouse. And it is something else entirely. You can smell it before you see it. A mixture of damp wood, boiled herbs, old sweat, soap if you're lucky, and something suspiciously like wet dog. But it's warm. And in a world where cold kills more people than swords, warmth is irresistible. The bathhouse sits in the center of town, but near the fish market, which is unfortunate, aromatically speaking. It's a low stone building with smoke curling from its vents and steam oozing from its cracks like the building itself is exhaling. Inside, it's chaos, friendly, humid chaos. Meet Otto. He's the bathkeeper, bald, wide, smiles like he knows your secrets, and charges extra to keep them. His towel is older than the kingdom. His sandals squeak. He carries a wooden ladle he uses for both water and discipline. Otto manages everything: fire, water, customers, complaints, missing underwear. The bathhouse has 3 rooms. 1, the changing room, where you undress and immediately regret not hiding that hole in your underclothes. 2, the hot room, where everyone steams together like overripe dumplings. 3, the soaking room, filled with wooden tubs, lukewarm water, and occasionally social tension. Let's be clear, this is not a private experience. You bathe with everyone, neighbors, rivals, complete strangers. Nudity is expected, modesty is optional, gossip is mandatory. Tonight, the hot room is full. A butcher, a blacksmith, a priest pretending not to look, 3 washerwomen comparing boils, and a traveling bard who has somehow managed to bring a lute into the steam. It's already warping. Everyone is pink, sweaty, talking. The conversation jumps from taxes to turnips to the Lord's new mistress, who it is claimed bathes twice a week, which is suspicious. Someone mentions politics. They are promptly doused with cold water. Otto's rule: no arguing, no fighting, no theology. He enforces it with a ladle. In the corner sits Imke. She's 50, sharp, unmarried, and fully in charge of the conversation despite saying very little. When she speaks, people listen. mostly because she remembers everything. Dates, names, who said what in which bath 2 summers ago. She once ended a marriage with a single raised eyebrow. Imke bathes for exactly 28 minutes every third day. No more, no less. She has her own bucket, brush, and a sliver of soap carved with her initials. She smells like rosemary and quiet judgment. Children run past, splashing, laughing, being immediately scolded. The water sloshes. Steam rises. Someone sings off-key. No one complains. It's a strange kind of peace. But it's not just about bathing. This is where deals are made, where marriages are proposed and sometimes dissolved, where plans are whispered in the hiss of hot water, and where secrets go to sweat. Otto sees everything. He says nothing, but he remembers. Once, he helped hide a runaway servant in the firewood shed. Another time, he broke up a fist fight between two farmers over soap. He has 5 scars and no regrets. His only real enemy? Plumbing, because bathhouses don't have real plumbing. They have buckets and barrels and drains that work only when the moon is in the right mood. Every morning, Otto hauls water from the well, boils it over fire, mixes it with cold from the rain barrels, adds herbs if he's feeling generous, or if someone's feet have been particularly aggressive. By midday, the water is mostly clean. By evening, let's just say, don't be the last bather. Otto changes the water once a week, twice if someone important is coming. He claims the filth makes you stronger. He also claims he's 43. He is not. Still, people trust him, because here, among steam and sloshing, people feel human, scrubbed, sweaty, unarmored. Here, you see the baker's scars, the knight's limp, the seamstress's missing finger. Here, everyone is flesh and steam and softness. Even the harshest faces melt in the heat. By nightfall, the bathhouse quiets. Couples whisper, children doze. Otto snores in the corner, 1 foot in a tub, holding his ladle like a scepter. Imke leaves, wrapped in her linen, hair damp, cheeks flushed. She nods to the stars. The town is quieter now, and maybe, just maybe, cleaner. Because in a world of grime, toil, and fire, a little steam can feel like salvation. Tonight we go to school. But don't bring a backpack. There are no desks, no blackboards, no cafeteria, no recess, just wooden benches, stiff robes, and the faint sound of despair scratching its way through Latin declensions. This is the grammar school of St. Arnulf's, a 1-room building attached to a church staffed by a monk with a suspicious cough and exactly 0 patience. His name is Brother Gerald. He is old, possibly immortal. His spine is permanently hunched from years of writing on uneven tables. His fingers are ink-stained. His beard contains 3 crumbs and a tiny feather. He has never smiled. Some say he was born frowning and simply leaned into it. His tool of choice, the birch rod. Not for walking, for discipline. Brother Gerald teaches with 3 things. 1, a copy of Donatus, the Latin grammar so confusing it might be a curse. 2, a wax tablet. 3, and sheer, unapologetic intimidation. His students, boys, exclusively, because girls are not deemed necessary for literacy unless they're noble or become nuns. Everyone else learns silence. The boys range in age from 7 to 14. Some are barefoot, some are orphans. All of them are terrified. They sit on long benches with no backs. They write with styluses on wax tablets. One mistake, scrape and start again. Quills and ink are only for the advanced or the wealthy. A spilled ink pot can derail your education and your fingers. Today's lesson, conjugating verbs. They chant in unison, voice trembling, amo, amas, amat. Brother Gerald walks behind them like a wolf among sheep, listening, watching, waiting for an error. He hears one. A boy stutters on the 3rd person plural. The rod comes down, not hard, just loud, enough to make every other verb in the room tense up. Correction is immediate. So is shame. This is learning in the Middle Ages. Repetition, fear, occasional bleeding. Lunch is a chunk of bread. If you're lucky, cheese. You eat in silence. Any talking, laughing, or chewing with your mouth open may result in grammar. Not more food, more grammar. Brother Gerald believes in rules, in Latin rules. And that pain is a language all students understand. Still, learning happens, against the odds. Some boys thrive, like Willen. He's 11, fast, clever, eyes like storm clouds, and a memory that traps everything. He already knows Latin, mostly, reads ahead, hides copies of Ovid under his robes and pretends it's scripture. Brother Gerald suspects, but he says nothing. Because Willen has potential, and potential is dangerous. You see, learning isn't just about knowledge, it's about control. Boys who learn to read can read anything. Boys who learn to write can send messages no one else can decipher. That's power. And power is always political. So the church watches closely. Willen watches back. He writes at night by candle stub on scraps of stolen parchment. Not prayers, stories about knights and monsters, about gods who cry and devils who laugh, about a world where no one holds the rod. His classmates whisper that he's cursed, that words follow him, that the ink in his veins burns hotter than fire. He likes that. He doesn't deny it, because in a world where everything is ruled by scripture, sword, or silence, imagination is rebellion. One day, a nobleman visits. He brings his son, rich, well-fed, arrogant. The boy can't spell his own name. Brother Gerald praises him anyway, says he has divine potential. Willen says nothing, but he writes a poem that night. The fat fox sits unearned on stone. His words are air, his thoughts none known. He buys his place with coin, not mind. A prince in title, a peasant blind. He hides it in his boot. 2 days later, it's found. Brother Gerald reads it aloud. Everyone knows who wrote it. Willen stands, does not flinch. He expects the rod. Instead, Gerald nods once and burns the parchment. Then gives Willen extra work. Latin, Greek, logic, private sesh after class, no praise, just more grammar. And Willen, without complaint, absorbs it all because he understands now. Words are weapons, and he's learning to wield them. Years later, no one remembers the noble's son, but Willen, he writes, for kings, for rebels, for memory. And sometimes, just sometimes, he thinks of Brother Gerald. Old, gruff, terrifying, but the first to say, without saying, you're dangerous, and not mean it as an insult. Tonight, we follow a sound, not a chant, not a prayer, not the clank of armor or the moan of the sick. It's the rhythmic tink-tink of metal on metal, the sound of a dent being rebuked, of a hole being humiliated, of a pot being convinced, sometimes violently, to hold soup again. This is the music of Isambert the Mender, a man whose entire life fits inside a cart no bigger than a coffin, though far more practical. He's 42, wiry, with arms like cables and eyes that never stop scanning. His clothes are patched, then patched again, until the original fabric is mostly a rumor. His beard grows where it wants, and his fingernails are permanently decorated in shades of soot, brass, and questionable stew. He is a tinker, a wandering pot fixer, a profession older than taxes and nearly as essential. Isambert doesn't stay. He moves. From village to hamlet to roadside fire pit, wherever there's a cooking pot that hisses when it shouldn't. His tools hang from his belt like trophies. Small hammers, clamps, iron picks, hand-forged pliers, a tiny anvil that doubles as a stool. Every morning he wakes with the sun, stretches, mumbles a curse at his knees, lights a fire and boils tea in the same kettle he's fixed 4 times. Then he works. People bring him their wounded cookware, a cracked cauldron, a bent ladle, a skillet that refuses to lie flat like it has moral objections. He fixes them all, carefully, lovingly, one tap at a time. Because Isambert understands something most forget. In a world without Teflon, a pan is everything. You don't eat if your pot leaks. You don't boil if your kettle has a hole. You don't survive winter on hope and cold soup. He charges little. A coin, a heel of bread, a song if it's good, but never nothing. Because skill deserves payment, even if the world disagrees. He's not just a fixer of pots. He's a bringer of news. When he arrives in a village, people come not just for repairs, but for stories. What happened in the last town? Did the king really die? Is it true they found witches in the marsh? Isambert always smiles. He never confirms. He simply tells a story. Maybe true, maybe not, but always worth listening to. He once told a tale of a skillet that cooked food without fire, a magical ladle that stirred by itself, a pot that whispered its owner's name at night. Children believed him. Adults wanted to. He says the line between truth and cookware is thinner than people think. By dusk, he rolls up his tools, feeds the fire, and disappears into the edge of the village. Never in the center. He doesn't belong there. He sleeps beside his cart, under a blanket that has seen more road than roof. The stars are his ceiling. The wind is his gossip. Sometimes he dreams of staying, a cottage, a roof that doesn't creak, maybe even a kitchen of his own. but the road calls louder, because Eisenbert knows fixing is his way through the world. He doesn't fight battles, he doesn't write songs, he doesn't hold land or title, but he makes broken things work again. That matters. Once a lord offered him a permanent position. "Fix my estate's tools," he said. "You'll have meat twice a week." Eisenbert declined. Too many rules, too many doors, and no one there would really listen. In the villages, people listen, not just to his stories, but to each other. Around the fire, waiting for a pot to cool, people talk, share, argue, laugh, cry. The pot becomes the excuse. The mender becomes the mirror. He has seen marriages begin and end beside a sputtering stew. He has seen children learn how to hold tools, to ask questions, to wonder. He once taught a girl how to patch copper. She now runs her own stall, calls herself mistress of metal. He beams whenever he passes through. Not proud, just reminded that fixing things leaves a mark, even if it's invisible. By candlelight, he sometimes examines his own hands, scarred, burnt, steady. He wonders if anyone will remember him, not his name, not his stories, but the pot that didn't leak, the ladle that held, the kettle that sang again. And maybe that's enough, because in the end, we're all a bit cracked, a bit dented, held together by someone's patience. And maybe, if we're lucky, by someone like Eisenbert. Tonight, we visit the doctor. Well, not exactly. We visit a doctor of sorts. He calls himself Master Aurelius, healer of flesh and spirit. His actual name is probably Bert. He has no formal training, no license, and no ability to pronounce gangrene without giggling. But in the eyes of the villagers, he is their only hope between a stubbed toe and a shallow grave. Aurelius is 50 or 70. No one can tell under all those robes, scarves, and dramatic hats. He wears 4 rings, none of which are gold, and all of which leave green stains. He smells of garlic, vinegar, and overwhelming confidence. His cart is a rolling apothecary of chaos. Jars filled with questionable herbs, bottles labeled tonic of vital winds, a mummified rat for fertility, and a book, bound in what he claims is dragon skin, but suspiciously feels like goat. He arrives in town with flair, announces himself via trumpet, played poorly, sets up near the well, where foot traffic is high and skepticism is low. He lays out his wares on velvet cloth, stained, slightly singed, and begins his pitch. "Lords and ladies of humble soul, behold the solution to all your bodily complaints: gout, pox, melancholy, excess wind." He does not wait for symptoms. He tells you what you have, and then sells you the cure. For swollen humors, try leeches, 3 for a groat, 5 if you're very sick. For bad dreams, burned batwing and a chant. For coughing, gargle with boiled thistle, recite the Lord's Prayer backward, and avoid goats. Somehow, people believe him. Because when you live in a world where actual doctors bleed you until you faint, a man with flair and questionable morals suddenly seems charming. His most popular remedy? The elixir of golden vitality. It's mostly honey, wine, and whatever root he had that week. It tastes terrible. It does nothing, but it feels important. One sip, and people straighten their backs, widen their eyes, and declare, "Yes, I do feel something." Aurelius nods solemnly. He calls it alchemy. The priest calls it blasphemy. The blacksmith calls it horse wine. But still, every time Aurelius returns, the line is longer. Because he listens, he touches foreheads. He says words like balance and essence and vital dew. No one knows what they mean, but they sound smarter than "you'll probably die soon." He keeps a box labeled confidential. It contains fake teeth, wigs, and spare mustaches. He uses them to disguise himself in towns where his treatments have backfired. Once a man took the elixir and claimed he could fly. He could not. They buried him with a half-full bottle and a note. At least he felt alive. Still, Aurelius feels no guilt because he believes in what he sells. He genuinely thinks fennel helps memory, that boiled nettles ward off betrayal, that if you chant to your liver, it behaves better. He once tried to remove a mole with a hot spoon and a prayer. The mole stayed. The patient fainted. He still counts it as a partial success. At night, he records research notes, mostly drawings, mostly wrong. He sketched a map of the body once, put the heart next to the stomach, and labeled the brain optional. In his dreams, he sees himself opening a school, teaching healing arts of the earthly sphere. His motto, if it smokes, it works. Despite everything, some things actually do help. He recommends rest, warm soup, avoiding certain mushrooms, and sometimes just sitting in the sun and crying. And those things, oddly enough, do heal. So maybe he's not a fraud. Maybe he's just very enthusiastic about being wrong. Children love him. He lets them sniff jars, bang drums, and chase geese in the name of exercise. Elders tolerate him because at least he's not bleeding them dry like the city surgeons. And once, just once, he saved a man. The blacksmith's apprentice. Burned badly. Aurelius smeared him with sheep fat, wrapped him in cabbage leaves, and told him to sleep near the hearth. The boy lived. Aurelius claimed victory. The priest claimed it was divine intervention. The blacksmith claimed it was luck. The boy claimed he mostly healed out of spite. Either way, he lived. And in the village record, under medical assistance rendered, they wrote, "Consulted that one with the hat. Boy still breathes," which, by medieval standards, is a glowing review. By morning, Aurelius packs his cart, leaves behind strange smells, strange stains, and stranger stories. People wave, some out of gratitude, some out of relief. He waves back, tips his hat, and yells over his shoulder, "Remember, if the boils return, don't blame the soup." Then he's gone, off to the next town, the next cough, the next chance to pretend, to persuade, to perform. Because in a world where healing is guesswork, hope often comes with a loud trumpet and questionable hygiene. Tonight, we lace up. Not in sneakers, not in leather boots with air cushions or memory foam. We're going medieval, and medieval shoes are a crime. But let's not judge too quickly, because tonight we meet Matilde, the town's only cordwainer. A shoemaker, not a cobbler. Cobblers repair shoes. Cordwainers make them from scratch. And Matilde? She makes them angry. Not on purpose, but her shoes are better than what the nobles import, and some people find that offensive. She says, if your toes are bleeding, at least do it in style. Matilde is 35, sharp-tongued, and always chewing something, often leather. She smells like tanned hide, smoke, and beeswax. Her hands are strong. Her back is sore. Her shop is small, cramped, and filled with the groans of unfinished souls. She starts every morning by cursing her hammer for hiding itself. Then she lights a candle, sharpens her knives, and picks the worst pair on the rack to deal with first. Making shoes in the 14th century is not glamorous. You begin with a dead animal, usually a cow, sometimes goat if you're feeling spicy. The leather must be soaked, stretched, scraped, dried, softened, then sworn at for good measure. Matilde does it all herself, usually while yelling at her cat Rufus, who thinks shoe scraps are a delicacy. Each pair takes hours. She cuts the sole first, thick, tough, almost boot-like. Then the uppers, stitched by hand because she doesn't trust glue. Glue, in her words, is the devil's snot. Thread is waxed, needles are bone, and yes, she's stabbed herself, repeatedly. Some shoes are soft and slipper-like, others are pointed and ridiculous, made for noblemen who enjoy tripping over their own feet. Fashion, Matilde mutters, is just pain with embroidery. Her most popular design is called the Pilgrim. It's durable, water-resistant-ish, and allows for toe wiggling, something she insists is essential to survival. She's not wrong. Medieval roads are muddy, full of rocks, and occasionally contain sheep. A bad shoe means infection. Infection means amputation. Amputation means nobody's dancing at the harvest feast. So Matilde's shoes, they matter. But customers rarely see that. They complain. This doesn't match my tunic. My heel feels betrayed. Why can't it be softer? To which she always replies, because you're walking through cow dung, not clouds. Still, people come. Farmers with feet like bricks, soldiers with calluses that could be used as currency, children who grow too fast and need new shoes every moon, even monks who claim to walk with humility but still want arch support. Matilde keeps a wall of foot drawings, outlines, with notes like, bunions of doom, left toe, possibly cursed. This one lies about their size. Her record for the widest foot is still unbeaten. She had to use part of a saddle. She's proud of that one. Not all her work is honorable. Once, she made a pair of shoes for a thief. Soft soles, silent step, light leather. He was caught anyway. Slipped on a cabbage. She added a note to his foot sketch. Sabotaged by salad. Sometimes nobles order custom shoes. With embroidery, with buttons. with imported thread from somewhere called Venice, which she suspects is just East London with better PR. They pay well. They never pay twice. Too demanding, too delicate. Matilda prefers peasants. They say thank you and bring eggs. At night, she soaks her hands in warm water and hums old songs, the kind that make your bones feel older than you. She looks at her tools, awls, hammers, knives, each one chipped, worn, perfect, passed down or borrowed permanently. She remembers her mother's hands, also scarred, also stubborn, taught her how to measure feet with just her fingers, how to spot a liar by how they stand. Matilda never married, says she's already in a lifelong relationship with boots. They argue less and last longer. She sometimes dreams of opening a second shop in a bigger town with less mud, but that would mean hiring help and trusting someone not to ruin her stitchwork. Not happening. Rufus agrees. He guards the shop like a furry gremlin, attacks customers who smell too rich or wear perfume. He once stole a lord's silk sock and buried it behind the tannery. Matilda didn't ask questions, just made him a tiny hat out of the toe. She keeps it on the wall, labeled First Customer Refund, because shoes tell stories of travel, of work, of pain, of status. You can lie with words, but not with souls. They carry your truth. Matilda's own shoes? Hideous. One sole thicker than the other, stained, mismatched laces, but the fit, perfect. She's never slipped, never stumbled, and never let someone leave barefoot, even if they couldn't pay, because in a world of mud and bone, a good pair of shoes is the closest thing to mercy. Tonight we climb. Not a mountain, not a tower, just a roof. But not just any roof, a medieval thatched roof. A fragile miracle of straw, mud, and prayer. Welcome to the world of Ewald, professional thatcher and part-time survivor of gravity. He's 44, tall, sinewy, with sun-leathered skin and a permanent squint from decades of staring at rooftops under unpredictable skies. His beard is full of secrets and bits of hay. Ewald doesn't need a ladder, he is the ladder. He moves up beams and rafters with the grace of a cat and the joints of a man who regrets every step. His hands are calloused, his boots tied with rope, and his vocabulary rustic. He starts each day with a ritual. 1. Stretch. 2. Swear at the sky. 3. Swear louder if it's raining. 4. Sharpen his thatching knife. 5. Check his twine stash. Again, thatching is not glamorous. It's climbing onto roofs with bundles of straw, reeds, and hope, and hammering them down into something vaguely waterproof. Ewald uses wheat straw mostly, layered thick like fur on a sleeping bear. He lines them row by row, overlapping them downward so rain slides off instead of in theory. In practice, well, let's just say the wind has opinions. The work is dangerous. Roofs collapse, ladders slip, rafters snap, and one poorly placed step can turn you from craftsman into compost. Ewald's fallen 5 times, twice through roofs, once into a pigsty, once into a wedding, once onto a sleeping priest who assumed it was divine punishment and quit preaching for a week. Each time, Ewald got up, brushed off the straw, and muttered, "That'll teach that beam to doubt me." The villagers love him. He's reliable, expensive, but reliable. He charges in food or favors, a loaf for a patch job, a goat for a new roof, a promise of next harvest if you're poor but honest. He refuses coin unless it's melted down and turned into nails. He says straw respects barter more than metal, and you never argue with a man holding a sickle 12 feet above your head. He works year-round. Rain, he's on the roof. Snow, he's on the roof, sliding sideways, yelling at icicles. Lightning, still there. Claimed it charged the straw with energy. No one believed him. But the roof held. He trains no one. Apprentices slow him down. He once let a boy help. The boy tied a bundle upside down. It funneled rain into the chimney. They called it the indoor pond. Ewald fixed it, alone, grumbling for a month. His tools are simple: a wooden mallet, a thatching hook, a heavy knife with a curved smile, a needle the size of your hand for stitching wire and straw together like some prehistoric sewing project, and his hands. Always his hands, quick, steady, merciless. He knows when a bundle is too wet, too brittle, too wormy. He talks to his straw, scolds it, praises it, sings to it if the weather is foul. Villagers think it's witchcraft. He calls it quality control. Each roof takes days, sometimes weeks. He doesn't rush, because a rushed roof leaks, and a leaking roof ruins everything. In the medieval world, your roof is your shield. It guards your sleep, your food, your fire. Without it, you have mud and pneumonia. So Ewald takes it seriously. He once refused to thatch a house for a merchant who insulted his work. The merchant offered more coin. Ewald spat in it, said, "Gold can't fix stupid rafters." The merchant built with tiles instead. The tiles slid off in the first frost. One hit a duck. The duck lived. The merchant moved. Ewald thatched the house again 2 years later, quietly, efficiently, with a little smile no one questioned. Sometimes he adds surprises to the straw. A flower for luck. A twist of blue cloth to ward off lightning. Once, a child's drawing hidden under the ridge beam. Because even straw deserves a little joy. His own cottage, perfectly thatched, warm, dry, and taller than necessary because yes, he overcompensates. Inside, he keeps bundles of rare reed, a bottle of honey mead, and a small carved bird made from roof wood. He says it reminds him to stay grounded. No one questions it. They're just glad someone like him watches the sky so they don't have to. At night, Ewald lies on his back, listens to the roof above him. The soft whisper of straw settling, the creak of beams breathing, the rain tapping politely but never entering. It's peace, earned, woven, built one handful at a time. And if you ask him what keeps a roof strong, he'll grin and say, patience, twine, and knowing when to say no to tile. Tonight, we get lost, on purpose, because we're visiting a place where rivers flow uphill, dragons nap near trade routes, and cities appear based on rumors and wishful thinking. Welcome to the workshop of Master Halvard, cartographer of questionable accuracy and exceptional flair. Halvard is 50, bespectacled, though glasses don't help if your sense of scale is emotional, and covered in ink stains, mostly from maps, partially from frustration. His hands shake slightly from too much caffeine, too little rest, and far too many arguments with compasses. He lives alone, surrounded by parchment, quills, and gilt. His maps hang from beams, nailed to walls, scattered across floors like fallen leaves. Some are beautiful, some are chaotic. All are creative. Because in the medieval world, making a map was less documenting reality and more summoning a version of it into existence. And Halvard? He's a wizard of invented geography. He starts every morning with a ritual. 1. Feed the goose that provides his quills. 2. Apologize to the compass he dropped in the fire last week. 3. Unroll the largest map he's working on and whisper, "We'll get it right this time." He never does. His tools, a straight edge that isn't, a compass that sticks, and a ruler he doesn't use because the land doesn't care about rulers. He sketches coastlines based on merchant gossip. He draws forests where monks claim to have seen unusual squirrels. He adds towns if 3 people mention the same name in different taverns. Accuracy is flexible. One time, he drew an entire peninsula based on a barmaid's story about a dream she had involving salt air and unusually polite fish. It made it onto a king's map. The king tried to invade it. They found nothing. But Halvard insists the fish were probably on break. He labels things creatively. Here be bears with opinions. Probably not a swamp, but don't risk it. Town of unclear morals, avoid during Lent. River that moves slightly each year, rude. To Halvard, the purpose of a map isn't to tell you where to go. It's to warn you what might happen if you try. He includes monsters, because people believe in monsters. Sea serpents, hill giants, cloud wolves, not because he's superstitious, but because he knows maps aren't just about land. They're about fear, hope, desire. If a sailor sleeps better knowing a dragon guards a certain bay and keeps pirates away, then on the map it goes. Sometimes he's right. Once he marked cursed woods, avoid unless armed with banjo. Years later, a group of mercenaries entered those woods with nothing but swords. Only one returned. He now plays the banjo. Halvard's biggest commission came from a duke. "Map my lands," the duke said. "I want to see what I own." So Halvard drew 3 rivers, 1 real, 7 villages, 5 hopeful, 2 mountains, entirely speculative, and a lake shaped like a duck. The duke was furious, until a traveling merchant confirmed the lake did indeed resemble a duck. Halvard was paid in full, and never asked back. He works best alone. People asking questions ruins the flow. Why is the road purple? Why is this city underwater? Why is this mountain labeled oops? The answer, always, is the same. because maps are stories, and sometimes stories leak. He teaches no apprentices, except his niece, Gilda, 12 years old, obsessed with drawing cats into every forest. Halvard pretends to disapprove, but secretly he leaves space for them now. She once added a cat-shaped island. It appeared on 3 other copies. A sailor swore he saw it. Now it's called Isle of Whiskers. Halvard smiles every time he redraws it, because truth is slippery, and maybe the map makes the world, not the other way around. He's never left the valley, claims he gets seasick on bridges, but he's mapped half the continent through letters, whispers, bribes, and the occasional vision brought on by moldy cheese. At night, he lights a candle, sharpens a quill, and adds another line to a world no one's seen, but everyone wants to believe exists. Sometimes he stares at the blank corner of a page and mutters, "Something's there. I can feel it." Then he draws a mountain, gives it a name, and makes it real. Because in Halvard's world, if it's on the map, it's true enough. Tonight, we dig. Not for treasure, not for secrets, but for necessity. Because this is the land of the dead, and someone has to keep it tidy. Meet Oswin, the gravekeeper. 50-ish, gaunt, wears the same brown tunic year-round, smells faintly of damp earth and regret, has a limp that gets worse in rain and a laugh that gets worse around clergy. He lives in a shack on the edge of the graveyard. 1 room, 1 bed, 1 shovel, 3 cats, none of which like him very much. Oswin doesn't smile, he doesn't need to. The dead aren't picky about mood. He wakes before dawn, drinks something that might be tea or might be a boiled mistake, then walks the rows. His job? Keep the paths clear, fix sunken graves, shoo off dogs who like to dig recreationally, and make sure no one wakes up confused. Yes, that happens, because in the medieval world, death is not a clean exit. Sometimes people get buried prematurely. It's rare, but Oswin's dug up enough scratch-marked coffins to keep a bell on hand, just in case. He calls it the oops rope. You ring, he digs. No judgment. He's buried peasants, priests, nobles, sinners, saints, and 1 juggler who insisted on being buried with 5 apples and a sarcastic grin. He still remembers the tombstone. He dropped 1. Most graves are simple: a pit, a body, a prayer, some stones, sometimes a marker if the family can afford it. If not, Oswin carves initials with a nail and moves on. He digs with precision. Graves must be deep enough to deter wolves, shallow enough to keep from hitting water. He knows which parts of the ground are soft, which ones flood, which ones hold on too tight. He once broke a shovel on a root. Cursed it so eloquently the local bishop blushed, but he fixed it. The shovel, not the bishop. At night he writes in a little book. A record, not names, just impressions. Kind eyes, heavy silence. Smelled of rosemary and fear. Didn't want to go. No one sees this book, except the cats. He keeps it in a box under his bed with 3 coins and a lock of hair tied in red thread. He never explains. Oswin's not religious, but he nods to the moon and says hello to crows, and once gave a sermon when the priest fainted mid-funeral. He said, "He was here, now he isn't, but the worms thank him." No one applauded, but no one forgot it either. Children fear him, adults respect him. Monks avoid him unless necessary, but they all come to him eventually, because death is loyal, and Oswin is always ready. He believes in dignity. He cleans the dead, straightens limbs, closes eyes, even if no one's watching. Especially then. He says the dead deserve one last kindness, even if they didn't earn it. He's buried lovers side by side, enemies 10 feet apart. He's lied to families who asked, did they suffer? He always says no. He thinks it helps. Sometimes people bribe him to bury secrets, letters, amulets, knives. Once a scroll sealed with wax and blood. He never opens them. Burial is its own silence. His shack has no luxuries, but it has warmth. A chair that groans, a window that leaks, and shelves of candles, some lit, some waiting. He never locks his door. He says if someone wants in that badly, let them explain it to the cats. He's been offered other jobs, town watch, toll collector, even pig herder. He declined. Said pigs are louder than ghosts and less polite. Every spring, he plants flowers between rows. Not because he's sentimental, but because it keeps weeds in check and confuses superstitious gravediggers who think daffodils ward off curses. They don't. But they're pretty. One night, a boy snuck in, dared by friends, to touch a tombstone and shout, "I'm not afraid." The boy tripped, broke a tooth. Oswin found him, didn't scold, just handed him a lantern, said, "If you're brave enough to mock the dead, be brave enough to light their path." The boy grew up, became a monk, still visits, still leaves a candle on All Souls' Eve. Oswin never married. He says love is a kind of grave you climb into willingly, but he once wrote a name on a stone and never told anyone whose it was. He sits by it sometimes, says nothing, lets the wind speak, because in his world, silence is the truest prayer. Tonight we enter the noise, trumpets, drums, shouting, laughing, sobbing, sometimes all from the same person, because tonight is fair night. And at the center of it all stands Marin, the Fairmaster. He's not a noble, not a priest, not even technically a citizen, but for these 3 days of chaos, he is king. His crown, a battered felt hat with 4 colored feathers and something that might be a breadcrumb. His scepter, a walking stick carved with faces, happy, sad, drunk, and asleep. Marin is 48, slightly crooked from old injuries, quick talking, faster thinking, and blessed with a voice that can command silence or start a riot. He organizes everything, the jugglers with questionable coordination, the merchants with too many coins and too few morals, the pig racers, the strong men who lift barrels then drop them on their own feet, the poets who rhyme love with dove and then beg for stew. He is both ringmaster and referee, and if you try to cheat, he sees you because he sees everything. He begins each fair with the same words, "Welcome to the edge of sense. Leave your logic at the gate and your shame with the chickens." Everyone cheers. No one knows what it means. He sets up a central square of booths, barrels, tents, and improvised stages. A circle of chaos, a swirl of smells, roasted meat, burnt sugar, unwashed performers, and somewhere, always, onions. The games are rigged. The dice are loaded. The prizes are cursed, probably, but no one minds. Because the fair isn't about winning, it's about feeling alive, feeling loud, feeling like something other than a peasant in a muddy village watching your cabbage rot. Here, you can be a knight for 5 minutes, or a poet, or a hero who eats 14 pies and regrets it publicly. There's music, always. Flutes, drums, a hurdy-gurdy no one understands. People dance in circles. Trip, get up, dance again. Children run wild, faces sticky, pockets full of strange trinkets, half of which were definitely not paid for. Marin lets it happen. He believes in freedom, just not too much. He carries a whistle carved from bone. 1 sharp blast means stop. 2 blasts means run. 3? You don't want to know. He once ended a knife fight between 2 cheese vendors using only a rubber chicken and harsh sarcasm. He once stopped a runaway goat cart with a net, a loaf of bread, and sheer eye contact. He once fell into a barrel of ale during a toast, emerged soaked, and was cheered like a hero. The fair runs 3 days. By day, it's laughter and color. By night, it's darker. Candles flicker, shadows stretch, the music slows, the laughter turns into murmurs. Deals are made, secrets exchanged, love declared, briefly and often poorly. Marin walks the grounds with a lantern and a stick. He nods at drunks, redirects lost lovers, checks that the knife thrower isn't too drunk. Once, he found a child asleep beneath the puppet stage. He didn't wake her, just sat nearby until dawn, keeping stray dogs and worse things away. When she woke, he handed her a toffee and a story about a goblin queen who guards sleeping girls. She still comes to every fair. Now with her own children, Marin remembers faces, not names, but faces, and debts. If you wrong someone at the fair, he will know, and he will balance the scales, not with punishment, but with poetry. He once publicly shamed a pickpocket by composing a limerick about their hygiene and reciting it between fire-eater sets. The pickpocket returned every coin, and washed, twice. He collects oddities, a bone whistle, a cursed dice, a coin that always lands on its edge. He keeps them in a pouch with a hole, says if they want to stay, they will. By the 3rd night, the fair is fraying. Voices hoarse, flags tattered, bread stale, but no one wants to leave. Because they know. This feeling won't last, the fields will empty, the colors will fade, the mud will return, and they'll be just villagers again. But for now, they dance, they shout, they kiss strangers and forgive themselves. Because Marin gave them 3 days of magic, 3 days of what if, And when the final fire goes out, when the last tent falls, he tips his hat to the moon and whispers, "Same time next year." Tonight, we warm up, but not by the hearth, by the kiln, the brick kiln, because it was before castles can rise, ovens can bake, or even your sad little hut can stand up to a breeze. Someone has to make the bricks. Enter Hedda, keeper of fire and shaper of clay. She's short, broad, covered in soot from eyebrow to ankle. Her arms are thick from lifting things that burn. Her back is permanently arched from hauling wheelbarrows of raw earth. Her voice sounds like gravel arguing with sandpaper. She lives beside the kiln, a blackened dome of stone and earth that breathes smoke and heat like a sleeping dragon. The kiln is older than anyone remembers. Some say it was built by Romans. Others say it just grew there one day out of spite. Hedda doesn't care. She only knows how to feed it. Her day starts before dawn. Always. She wakes in darkness, checks the coals, curses the cold, and throws on the same tunic she wore yesterday and the day before. There is no such thing as clean in her line of work. She eats porridge, dry, no milk, no time. Then she gets to work. First the clay. It must be dug by hand, then stomped, then mixed with water, then stomped again. By the end, the clay is both smooth and personally offended. Then come the molds, wooden, heavy, greedy. Each mold must be filled, packed, smoothed, flipped, and again, and again, and again. By noon, Hedda has made 100 bricks. Give or take a dropped one. She doesn't count the broken, only the survivors. Then comes drying. Bricks must rest 3 days minimum. Too wet and they explode in the fire, too dry and they crumble. She lines them up in rows like sleeping soldiers, covers them if rain threatens, prays to whatever dirt god listens. Finally, the firing. Bricks are stacked in the kiln in tight arches. Layer after layer, air channels, gaps, a secret language of placement. Then she lights it. It burns for days, constant, unforgiving. She must stoke it hourly, chop wood, feed flame, check temperature, not with tools, but instinct. She judges heat by how her hair smells or whether her eyebrows twitch. She hasn't had eyebrows since spring. She's proud of that. Neighbors avoid her. Too dirty, too intense, too likely to yell at clouds. But when they need a new oven, a stronger wall, a fireproof floor, they come crawling. She charges fairly. 1 pig equals 200 bricks. Half a goat for anything decorative. She once made bricks with hearts carved in them for a baker. The baker's wife left him a week later. Hedda kept the mold, says it makes great paperweights. She has no family. Claims she was born in the kiln, that she ate her twin and learned fire early. Probably not true, but no one argues. Children whisper that she sweats ash, that she doesn't sleep, only smolders, that she once punched a chimney and fixed it. Again, maybe not true, but again, who wants to check? Her hands are always moving, kneading, stacking, scraping soot from under nails. She smells like charcoal and confidence. She sings when she works, low, rough, old songs about dirt and stone. Sometimes she forgets the words and makes new ones. Her favorite line, "If it crumbles, I didn't build it." Once a nobleman visited, wanted custom bricks for a manor. All uniform, no blemishes, he said. Hedda stared, then spat into the fire and said, "Buy wax then, clay has opinions." He left, later sent coin anyway. She made his bricks, each one slightly different, because perfection is boring. Once during winter, the kiln went out. No wood, no clay, just silence. Hedda sat beside the cold dome for 3 days. Didn't speak, didn't eat, just stared. On the 4th day, a boy from town brought her twigs. No reason, just felt like she shouldn't be alone. She gave him a brick, unfired, useless, said, "You'll know when to bake it." 10 years later, that boy became a mason. He still keeps the brick, never fired it. Says it reminds him that everything begins soft. At night, the kiln glows, soft orange, gentle huffing, like a beast dreaming. Hedda sits beside it, a mug of broth, a cat on her lap, probably feral, but she hasn't asked. She watches sparks float into stars, wonders how many bricks she's made, how many still stand, how many hold up towers, walls, hearths, memories. She shrugs, sips, and mutters to the fire, "We don't build to be remembered. We build so something else can remember." Tonight we deliver, not food, not weapons, not justice, just words, wrapped in wax, smuggled in boots, stashed in bread, tied to legs. Because tonight we follow Balin, royal courier, and possibly the only person in 5 counties who's actually been to 5 counties. He's lean, weather-beaten, hair shaved close, lice reasons, boots patched with every kingdom's mud, and a scarf that might be older than some abbeys. He's 39, looks 50, feels 90, still outruns most horses. Because Balin isn't a rider, he's a walker, a runner, a letter bringer, a message whisperer, an occasional spy, and a full-time bladder holder. His job is simple. Take a scroll from one place to no questions, no deviations, no delays, except the roads are mud pits, the forests are full of bandits, and sometimes the scroll is cursed, or fake, or soaked in ale by accident. Balin doesn't ask, he just goes. He carries no weapon, only a walking stick with one end sharpened into please don't, and a satchel, waterproofed with beeswax, lined with stolen priest robes, and always too heavy. Inside, scrolls, sealed with wax, some royal blue, some noble red, some suspiciously black, all urgent, none of his business. He hasn't read a single one. Okay, one. It said, "Dear Margery, your turnips are disappointing." He once delivered a letter that ended a war, another that started one, another that was just a poorly drawn fish. He doesn't judge, he just delivers. Every morning he checks his route, makes adjustments based on storms, rumors, and recent lynchings. He never takes the same path twice. Routine gets you robbed, he says, so does looking confident. So Balin looks tired, forgettable, somewhere between peasant and pest. Perfect. He travels light, a flask, a knife, a pouch of dried fruit, a pair of extra socks blessed by 3 different monks and still permanently damp. He avoids inns, too loud, too many eyes. He sleeps in haystacks, tree branches, caves, and once in a crypt. He says the dead snore less than drunks. He's outrun dogs, outwalked knights, outwitted toll collectors, once bribed a troll or very large man with a wheel of cheese and a bedtime story. It worked. Balin doesn't talk much, but he listens. He picks up gossip like burrs on a cloak. He knows who's scheming, who's dying, who's secretly married and very bad at hiding it. He forgets none of it, but shares nothing, because trust is the only thing lighter than parchment. He has scars, one from a crow, one from a fall, one from a letter that bit him. Don't ask. He counts them like landmarks, proof that he was somewhere once. He's seen cities burn, villages vanish, forests move, long story involves bees. And through it all, he walks, always forward. Because messages don't deliver themselves. He doesn't get thanked. At best, a grunt. At worst, a sword. Once, a lord threw the scroll back and said, "Tell them I'm dead." Balin nodded, wrote it down, moved on. Another time, he delivered a wedding vow to a woman who hadn't heard from her betrothed in a year. She read it, paused, then said, "He always did have terrible timing." Balin left before the screaming started. His only joy? Maps. Crude, hand-drawn, wildly inaccurate maps. He collects them, corrects them, adds footnotes like "river lies," "bridge hates goats," "don't trust the goose here." His satchel is lined with notes, marginalia from a man who walks where most fear to crawl. At night, he builds small fires, warms his feet, talks to the stars, sometimes reads from a book he's memorized but keeps anyway, the sayings of Saint Tybalt the extremely lost. His favorite line, "Even when the path disappears, walk like it's still there." He once taught a child to read, just enough to write her own letter. 3 years later, she handed him a sealed scroll, said, "Please get this to my brother." He did. Took him a month, but he did. The boy cried. Balin said nothing, walked away. Sometimes he wonders what all these letters do, whether words really change anything. Then he remembers the boy's tears and walks faster. Because in a world where so much is broken, messages still arrive, hope still travels, even if it limps, even if it bleeds, even if it's late. As long as Balin walks, it gets there. Tonight, we stay home. We don't dig, we don't run, we don't thatch, bake, stitch, burn, bury, carry, or lie. We just exist. Because tonight we end not with a battle or a coronation, but with a breath, a simple moment, at the edge of a medieval village, under a thatched roof, behind a wooden door that creaks like it has opinions, a room with a dirt floor, a table made of 3 mismatched planks, a bed stuffed with straw, feathers, and the regrets of 2 generations. And in that bed lies Ansel, an ordinary man. 50, maybe. A father, a farmer. Not famous, not rich, not particularly clever, but very, very real. He's had a long day, up before dawn, chased pigs, bartered with the miller, who was somehow both deaf and argumentative, helped his neighbor patch a wall, taught his youngest how to tell the difference between edible mushrooms and marital mistakes. He didn't win every battle, but he's still standing, barely. Dinner was thin stew and thicker bread, no meat, just salt and stubbornness. But there was laughter, there was warmth. The fire crackles low now, smoke curls up through the chimney like a lazy ghost. Outside, crickets shout into the dark. Inside, the candle flickers, and Ansel lies back, exhausted, grateful. It's not a good life, not really. His knees ache, his wife snores, his children occasionally throw turnips at each other for sport. He owns one shirt that doesn't itch, and it's missing a sleeve. The rain leaks through the west wall, and no one has the energy to fix it. But still, it's his life, his land, his family, his breath. He remembers stories from the priest, of saints and kings, of miracles and monsters, but none of them ever fixed a fence, or scrubbed soot off a pot, or stayed up all night with a sick goat that later bit them out of spite. Those stories are loud, dramatic. His story, quiet, messy, mostly mud, but it's still a story. He looks to the rafters, thinks of his father, who died in this bed, who built this house with bare hands and bad math, who taught him how to fish even when the river was more ambition than water, who never said I love you, but once gave him the bigger half of the apple. Ansel blinks, feels the years, the ache behind his eyes, the burn in his shoulders, the peace somehow under it all. Because tonight, there's no storm, no war, no debt collector, just the ticking of the fire, the slow breath of his sleeping wife, and the distant hoot of an owl that sounds judgmental but might just be tired. He turns to the window. The stars blink back, no prophecy, no divine message, just cold dots in an endless black. But still, they shine. He smiles, not because things are perfect, but because they exist, because he gets this night. After all the chaos, all the nonsense, all the days of stepping in things he'd rather forget, tonight is still his. And that's enough. He closes his eyes, lets the world fade, lets the candle burn low, lets the straw shift and sigh, and as sleep pulls him down deep and quiet, the house exhales, the night watches, and time moves forward, carried not by kings, but by people like Ansel. So, what did you feel? Did you find a bit of yourself in the quiet brickmaker, the stubborn fairmaster, or the child too curious to stay quiet? Now I want to hear from you. Which part of this medieval journey struck the deepest chord? Was there a character you'd want to know more about? Or maybe, just maybe, you saw your own daily battles reflected in a world with no plumbing, no passwords, and no pause button. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Be as poetic or blunt as you like. This channel isn't just about storytelling. It's about remembering that even the softest voice from the past still has something to say. And hey, if you've been with me for this journey, or even if you just dropped in tonight and liked what you heard, please subscribe to the channel, not for algorithms, but for more nights like this, more candlelight, more forgotten lives, more quiet revolutions. Until then, rest well, dream weird, and I'll see you in the next story.